Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when dinner wasn't something you scrolled through on a delivery app. It was a crusty loaf that doubled as a personal pillow, mouse repellent, and sometimes, tragically, your only possession worth guarding. We're talking about bread, not the fluffy sourdough from your farmer's market. No, this was dense, dusty, sometimes moldy, always critical medieval peasant bread. The kind of bread you'd break your tooth on before bed, and then sleep next to like a nervous raccoon guarding its last snack. You're in a one-room timber cottage with smoke curling low under the thatched roof. The fire's out. It's damp. It always smells faintly of cabbage. And there's that familiar weight in your hands. A coarse, rock-solid hunk of barley bread, tightly clutched like a child's teddy bear. Because in this world, bread isn't just food. It's status. It's insurance. And if you don't sleep with it, someone or something else will eat it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing our strange little history club stretch across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a late 14th century peasant, and your dinner is also your bedtime routine. You'd laugh if someone asked what you had for dessert. You're just relieved the bread isn't green this time. You eye the loaf like a dog protecting a bone. You've seen neighbors lose theirs in the night to everything from rats to desperate siblings. It's not paranoia. It's strategy. You once caught your cousin nibbling on your breakfast while you were still asleep. Bread is never just bread. Depending on your region and the harvest, your ours is likely made from rye or barley, not wheat. That luxury's for nobles and clerics. You learned long ago that white bread isn't just tastier, it's practically holy. People will trade favors, labor, even scandalous gossip just for a single white roll. Your loaf is round and hard as a cobblestone. No fluffy centers here. You press it to your chest as you lie down on the straw, knees tucked, blanket shared with two other breathing furnaces. Your siblings. One of them's got a cold. Great. You're definitely catching that. But for now, all that matters is keeping your loaf dry, safe, and unchewed. You sometimes dream of sleeping in a bed alone, with a pillow, maybe even sheets. But tonight, like most nights, your bed is a flattened pile of straw that scratches like dry hay, and your comfort item is edible. Historians still argue whether peasants truly cuddled with their bread or just stored it nearby. But archaeological finds of loaf-sized storage niches near bedding areas hint that it wasn't uncommon. And since you don't have cupboards, backpacks, or trust in your siblings, keeping it under your cloak is the best defense you've got. Your loaf has a name. No, not an actual name like Greg, but it has identity. It's your loaf. It's got a thumbprint where you poked it earlier to check for softness. Still hard as ever. You made this bread yourself. Sort of. You milled the flour, mixed the dough, and hauled it down to the communal oven 2 villages over, where the baker cooked it for a cut of the final product. By the time you got it back, the edges were a little burned, and you're pretty sure it wasn't the same one you handed over. Still, it's yours now, and tonight, it sleeps beside you, like a lumpy, flour-dusted friend. You listen to the quiet snores and the occasional shuffle of straw. The air smells faintly of ash and sour milk. You wish for a pillow, but instead, your cheek rests against your arm. Your other hand stays curled around the loaf. You're not risking it. Not after what happened to Alric. Poor Alric. fell asleep with his bread on the windowsill to let it cool. Woke up to find a perfectly gnawed semicircle where a rat had helped itself. The thing even had the audacity to leave a crumb trail. Tiny rodent footprints like little stab wounds to Alric's pride. He cried for hours, then ate it anyway. You squeeze your loaf tighter. There's a comfort in the weight of it. As absurd as it sounds, it feels like a small victory. Today you got to eat and sleep with your bread. That's more than some get. Bread's more than just food. It's the difference between being full and being forgotten. And in a world where hunger is constant and possessions are few, bread becomes everything. Sometimes before you drift off, you imagine you're rich. Not royalty, just someone with a small chest of loaves. A corner with shelves, maybe one of those fancy flatbreads from the market. You've heard of breads with herbs in them. Imagine that, food that tastes like something. You yawn, the crust pressing into your ribs. You don't mind. You survived another day. You've got your bread. And for now, at least, no one's stolen it. You wake up to someone breathing far too close to your ear, and a faint snuffling sound near your hands. Instinct kicks in. You clutch your bread tighter and swing an elbow, not maliciously, just preemptively. Turns out it's your younger brother, and he's still mostly asleep. You both mumble something halfway between a curse and an apology and turn over. Bread safe. Crisis averted. But that moment, that sleepy, reflexive defense, is telling. This is the bread hierarchy in action. You're not just worried about food. You're worried about status, about survival. Because in medieval society, bread is more than nourishment. It's a social marker baked into your daily life. Your bread, coarse and dark, signals exactly where you sit on the feudal totem pole. You're a peasant, so you get the black bread made from rye, barley, or whatever grain or weed happened to grow this season. If you're lucky, it's free of ergot, that hallucinogenic fungus that loves moist rye and occasionally inspires visions of dancing skeletons or talking cows. Wheat bread? That's for the upper crust. Literally. Nobles eat finely sieved, pale loaves so airy they practically sigh when broken open. You saw one once, when your lord steward tossed a piece to the dogs during a feast. The dogs turned it down. You still think about that. Even among peasants there's a pecking order. Tenant farmers with decent plots sometimes blend in a bit of oat or spelt. But if you're landless, or if the harvest's gone sideways, which it often has, you're mixing in peas, beans, even sawdust. There's even a phrase, horse bread, for the tough brown slabs meant for animals but sometimes eaten by desperate humans. You've had it? Twice. Historians still debate just how rigid these distinctions were, whether some peasants had occasional access to better loaves during festivals or church feasts. But one thing is clear. Bread reveals class, luck, and the year's grain yield all in one bite. And then there's the matter of trencher bread. You've probably heard of this one. Thick slabs of stale bread used as plates at feasts, then either thrown to the poor or eaten by servants once they'd soaked up all the grease and gravy. Romantic? Maybe. Sanitary? Absolutely not. You wouldn't use your tunic sleeve as a spoon, but you'd definitely eat off bread that's been a meat sponge for an hour. The idea of bread being something you eat last, after it's held your meat and juices, is strangely comforting, and also terrifying. You once got a trencher from the manor cook on a good-humored day, and you nearly wept. It tasted like meat. Actual meat. You hadn't tasted meat in 2 months. And don't even get started on monastic bread. The monks have their own recipes. Strict, precise, blessed. Some of them even bake bread with crosses stamped in before baking. You wonder if that tastes holier. Probably not. But the Abbey's bread always smells clean and yeasty, while yours smells faintly of sweat and old stone. Then there's pain de bouche, a court term for bread fit for nobles' mouths, and pain de mer, the handbread meant for common folk. One's white, light, and elegant. The other is brown, dense, and capable of cracking a baby tooth. Guess which one you've got. You hear a rooster call outside, a lazy, scratchy crow from a bird that looks like it's been plucked and reassembled in haste. You rise slowly. Everyone does. A chorus of stretching, groaning, and straw crunching fills the room. Your mother's already up, grinding more grain with the quernstone, slow, steady circles, dust rising with every push. She's muttering about the miller skimming again. You nod. He always skims. And then you glance around, instinctively checking to see what everyone else is eating. Bread again. Different shapes, different sizes, but always bread. A girl across the room has a thick oat cake that looks like a barn shingle. An old man gnaws slowly on something that might once have been a roll, now more like fossilized evidence of a better time. You share your loaf, begrudgingly, with your brother. It's still intact, still yours. You rip it in half and pass it over. He tears into it without thanks. That's just the way of things. And then there's the village gossip, always accompanied by bread envy. Did you see how wide her loaf was this week? Think she's been sneaking extra grain from her lord's tithe? Or maybe her husband's got something going with the baker's daughter. You pretend not to care, but part of you catalogues the loaves you see each day. Who's thriving? Who's slipping? You've got a mental leaderboard of bread, and you're not alone. A small boy passes by with a weirdly perfect little white roll, clearly stolen from somewhere too fancy for his shoes. Everyone pretends not to notice. No one's going to rat him out. Not when your own dinner might be someone else's miracle tomorrow. Bread reflects everything here. Class, morality, sin, grace, suspicion. It's a loaf-shaped mirror, and tonight, like every night, you're sleeping next to your own reflection. You're grinding flour today, and it's about as fun as it sounds. Which is to say, it's not. You're hunched over the hand quern, turning the upper stone in slow, heavy circles as the grain groans beneath it. Each revolution feels like a punishment. Your palms are raw, your shoulders ache. And every now and then, a puff of flour dust flies into your eyes, your nose, your mouth, coating everything in a chalky veil that smells faintly of earth and mildew. The flour isn't even flour in the way you imagine it. It's not silky or white. It's grayish, speckled, coarse. You can see bits of husk, maybe even a small pebble or two. One time you bit down and chipped a molar. You spat it into the fire and swore like a priest with a stubbed toe. You're grinding rye today, maybe barley tomorrow. You use whatever grain you've got, and if you're short, well, you've got options. Less than savory ones. Sometimes people mix in broad beans or acorns. Sometimes it's dried peas. Sometimes, if things get really bleak, it's ground up tree bark. And no, it doesn't taste good. It tastes like you've lost a bet. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants routinely adulterated flour with non-grain fillers, or whether that only happened during severe shortages. But you know the truth, because your teeth do too. When the harvest fails or the miller gets greedy, you can feel the desperation baked into your bread. Your miller, by the way, is absolutely skimming. You see him squinting at your grain sack, like he's mentally calculating how much he can shave off the top. Then there's the milling toll, where he keeps a portion of the flour as payment. It's normal. It's expected. It's also maddening when you worked 2 days to collect that grain, and he walks off whistling with a sack heavier than yours. You sometimes wonder what flour even should taste like, because yours always smells a little suspicious. On hot days, you can catch a sour, almost damp note from the storage barrels. That's when you start checking for signs of mold. Not just the fuzzy kind, but the dangerous, invisible kind. Ergot. That cursed fungus that grows on damp rye. It's the stuff of nightmares. Literally. If you bake bread with it, especially in winter, when moisture clings to the walls like a jealous ghost, you risk what some call St. Anthony's fire. First, your fingers tingle. Then come the burning sensations, convulsions, blackened limbs, madness, death. Some people start seeing things. Flames licking at the walls, demons dancing on rafters, faces in the bread itself. You've seen it happen. Old Rafe, who lived near the mill pond, once wandered through town stark naked, waving a stick like it was a sword and yelling about the bread gods. They found him in a tree 2 days later, muttering to his shoes. You still shudder when you see black spots on your crust. And yet sometimes you eat it anyway. Because the alternative is hunger. And hunger is always worse. Hunger doesn't make you hallucinate. It just makes you fade. You've had days where your ribs felt hollow, where you stood up and saw stars. Bread might be dangerous, but no bread is fatal. Some say monks and herbalists tried to figure out ways to clean bad flour. Maybe soak it, maybe dry it, maybe pray over it. Historians debate whether these efforts worked or were just wishful thinking. But you know that desperation invents all sorts of remedies. You once heard someone say to rub the grain between your palms and whisper to it. You tried. It didn't work. The worst part is, once the flour's ground, there's no telling what's inside. You bake it anyway. If it smells vaguely sweet, you start to worry. If it smells like wet socks, you bake it a little longer and pray. As you knead the dough, if you can call it that, it sticks to your fingers like damp clay. It's heavy, not elastic. You can't imagine it ever rising. And often, it doesn't. Yeast isn't some magic packet from a shelf. It's fickle, wild, often invisible. If you're lucky, the air's damp and warm enough for natural fermentation. If not, well, flatbread it is. Still, you shape it carefully, as best you can. You score a cross on the top, not just for baking, but as a blessing. You're not religious in the way the clergy wants you to be, but superstition fills the cracks where certainty fails. You whisper a line your grandmother taught you, bless the loaf and bless the hand that stole none. Then you carry your precious doughy lump to the communal oven. It's a half-day's walk, unless you're lucky enough to live in a village with its own. You join the queue, a jostling crowd of floury peasants with identical baskets. Everyone pretends not to eye each other's dough, but they do. You all know the game. You mark your loaf with a personal stamp, maybe a twig cross or a notch, so you can identify it after baking. Still, sometimes things go missing. You're pretty sure your loaf was swapped last week. You came back with something smaller, heavier, suspiciously onion-scented. You didn't complain. Complaining only makes you look like a troublemaker. So you wait, kneeling in the dust, watching the oven smoke curl into the sky. You talk about the harvest, about sore knees, about whether anyone's bread exploded last week. It happens, usually when someone adds too much water and not enough patience. Eventually, the baker calls you forward. Your loaf is done. You cradle it in your arms like a newborn. Hot, steaming, ugly. It smells like sour grain and ash. But it's yours. You will sleep with this tonight. By the time you arrive at the communal oven, the place is already alive with smoke, shouting, and a faint but ever-present scent of burning crust. It's not your turn yet. Of course it isn't. You know how this works. Everyone knows how this works. You line up, pretend to be patient, and brace for the inevitable bread politics. The oven belongs to the Lord. Everything does, really. The land, the oxen, the forest paths, and yes, the right to bake. So unless you've got your own hearth, and you don't, you come here. You pay in coin, flour, labor, or grudging smiles, whatever keeps your bread from going missing. The oven is a giant domed belly of stone, soot-caked and always radiating heat. Its mouth gapes open like a dragon, belching smoke and insults. The baker, who is exactly as sweaty and judgmental as you remember, guards the place like a troll at a toll bridge. He's not unkind exactly. He just has all the power and knows it. A nod from him means your dough goes in. A shrug, and you're waiting until next market day. You clutch your marked loaf a little tighter. You carved a unique X into its top, deep and uneven, so no one can swap it without notice. You hope. Last month, your cousin swears her loaf was stolen, replaced with a misshapen wad that smelled like garlic and regret. The baker offered a shrug and a proverb. The fire takes what it wants. Utter nonsense. Historians still debate how common these communal ovens truly were, especially in smaller hamlets. But in towns, they were central, sometimes even used as sources of civic pride. This oven, though? It's civic something, sure. Mostly civic suspicion. Today's crowd includes the usual suspects. An old woman with 3 flat loaves tucked in her shawl, a boy who clearly dropped his dough in the dirt and tried to brush it off with a leaf, and the miller's cousin, who somehow never has to wait in line. You hate her on principle. Your turn creeps forward. You sit on a rock and pass the time eavesdropping. There's talk of a merchant's cart broken in the ford. Someone supposedly saw a woman baking with eggs. Fancy. A few whisper about the baker's new assistant, young, smug, with flour-streaked hair and a suspiciously clean tunic. Finally, it's you. You approach the oven like a pilgrim at a shrine. The baker raises one eyebrow, gestures, and you hand over the dough like it's your child being left at the monastery gates. He looks at it, turns it over, grunts approvingly, and shoves it deep into the oven with a paddle. Now you wait again. 20 minutes. 30. You try not to pace. You stare at the smoke. You recite the bread-rising rhyme under your breath. If it lifts, you feast. If it sinks, you fast. If it bursts, you blame the cat. It's nonsense, obviously, but everyone says it. Eventually your loaf emerges, slightly singed on one side, cracked on top, but unmistakably yours. You breathe in the scent, earthy, toasted, slightly sour, and let out a sigh that's probably a little dramatic but entirely earned. You cradle it like treasure. And now comes the journey home. You don't dawdle. The village isn't that dangerous, but fresh bread can tempt even the most moral neighbor. You wrap it in cloth, tuck it under your arm, and walk quickly. On the path, you pass a familiar face. Martin, who once accidentally swapped your loaf with his during a feast. He nods politely. You give him a polite smile that says, "Touch my bread, and I will end you in your sleep." He gets the message. Back at your cottage, you set the loaf down like it's made of gold. Your siblings rush over, wide-eyed. You bark at them to wait. Not because you're cruel, but because the bread must cool. That's the rule. If you cut into it now, the crumb will gum up. It'll steam too much. It'll fall apart. Everyone knows this. Still, no one likes it. You all sit there staring at the thing like it might sprout legs and run. The temptation is unbearable. You let your fingers hover just over the crust. It's firm, ridged, and warm. You tap it, gently. It makes a pleasingly hollow sound. Music to your ears. Eventually you tear a chunk from the edge. Not too much, just enough to taste. It's dense. Slightly sour, a hint of char from the oven floor. It needs pottage to soften it up, or a bit of ale to chase it down. But it's good. It's better than last week's anyway. You divide the rest carefully. 1 piece each. 1 for tonight. 1 hidden away for morning. And 1, your piece, wrapped again and slipped beneath your cloak as you lie down. Because even now, even after the long walk, the soot, the suspicion, and the sneaky baker's apprentice, you're still not risking it. Not to rats, not to brothers, and definitely not to Martin. This loaf, hard-earned and half-burned, will sleep beside you tonight. You've just laid down, your bread nestled beneath your tunic like a secret when you feel it. That soft rustle, that eerie, skittering sound in the straw nearby. You freeze. You know that sound. It's not your brother. It's not the dog. It's them. Rats. Medieval rats are not shy. They're bold little opportunists with twitchy whiskers and zero respect for personal space. You hold your breath, one hand still protectively draped over your loaf as something sniffs audibly from the shadows. You hope it's just curious. You really hope it's not hungry. Because bread, in this world, isn't just for eating. It's storage. It's currency. Sometimes, it's a trap. You've hollowed out a loaf before. Carefully scooped the inside out, leaving a hard crust shell like a mini bread barrel. Filled it with cheese rinds, a bit of dried meat, even a few coins, if you had any. Then you plugged it shut with the crust and wrapped it up like any ordinary peasant's snack. In plain sight. Brilliant. Until the rats figured it out. Historians still debate how widespread the practice of hollow loaves as storage containers really was, but accounts from the period suggest it wasn't entirely uncommon. And it makes sense. What else do you have with a natural seal, a bland appearance, and no resale value? The only downside, anything that can smell food can smell through bread. You once watched a rat chew straight through a week's worth of supplies, tunnel into a pottage-laden hollow loaf, and get stuck. You found it in the morning, bloated and dead, half inside the bread. You screamed. Then you screamed again when your brother casually asked, "Do we still eat it?" You didn't. Usually. Rats, of course, are just one of the many dangers to your precious provisions. You've seen loaves go missing in less than a minute. One time, your neighbor left his out to cool on a windowsill. Bold move. By the time he turned back, not only was it gone, but there was a very smug chicken pecking the crumbs from the sill. You don't trust chickens either. Not anymore. Which is why you've developed the art of defensive sleeping. It involves one hand under the loaf, one foot strategically placed against the wall to catch vibrations, and an ear trained to the unique rhythm of mouse feet versus brother's feet. It's a skill, one honed over many nights of near theft. And then there are the stories. the fringe tales you whisper while mending tunics or shelling beans, the baker who found a snake curled up in a hollowed loaf, the monk who swore his bread screamed when sliced. Probably mold-induced madness, but still. Your favorite? The miller's son who, in a misguided attempt at hiding valuables, stuffed a crust with silver buttons and forgot. His mother baked it. They broke 3 teeth and learned a very expensive lesson about forgetting where you hide your treasure. Even bread-based thievery has a code. There's a kind of unspoken rule in your village. Don't steal someone's whole loaf. A bite, maybe. A crust. But if you take the whole thing, it's personal. One man did that last winter. Woke up to find his roof mysteriously missing 3 thatch panels. Pure coincidence, of course. There's something strangely comforting about this ritual. The absurdity of sleeping beside a hunk of food. The silent understanding among peasants that you do what you must. You sleep with your bread not because you're strange, but because you're smart. Because it's survival. Because in a world with no locks, no safes, and no second chances, a hard loaf is better than a soft trust. You roll over and tuck the bread tighter beneath your ribs. It's cooled now, and oddly warm against your skin. It smells faintly of ash and something sour, but familiar. Like safety. Like effort. Like, I made it through today. Some nights you find yourself whispering to it. Not actual words, just little sighs and hums as if it were a pet or a charm. You're not superstitious, really, but there's something ancient and ritualistic about protecting your bread. You've seen folks bless it, bury a crust beneath the threshold for luck, or leave a crumb on the hearth for household spirits. You've done at least 2 of those. Historians still argue whether these small folk customs were more religious or superstitious in origin. But to you, it doesn't matter. The bread is sacred because you made it. And if sleeping with it means fending off a few rats and skeptical glances, so be it. The cottage creaks in the night. A dog barks somewhere in the distance. You hear the wind scrape past the shutters, and the familiar chorus of sleeping siblings. Snorts, sniffles, a whimper from someone dreaming of geese again. And yet, in all this noise, you drift. One hand curled protectively over your dinner, your breakfast, and your petty bit of control in a world that rarely offers any. It's absurd. It's uncomfortable. It's medieval. And it's exactly how things are meant to be. You're not even fully asleep when you feel the familiar nudge of someone's cold foot against your back. It's your sister, wriggling for more space under the shared wool blanket. You grunt and scoot a little, careful not to jostle the precious lump tucked beneath your tunic. The loaf is still there, still safe. You fall into a half-sleep, comforted by its solid presence. This is the rhythm of your nights. Cramped, noisy, oddly reassuring. You share a single straw mattress with 2, sometimes 3 family members. There's no privacy, no pillows, no sheets. Just a communal nest of itchy straw, the occasional flea, and one shared body of warmth. And in your arms, like a bread-scented security blanket, is your loaf. If you're lucky, it's still warm from the oven. Sleeping with bread is more than just paranoia. It's insurance. If you leave it out, you might wake up to find it gnawed, crushed, or missing entirely. So you tuck it close to your belly like a miser with a coin purse. The bread is yours. You worked for it. And there's something oddly soothing about its presence. Solid, certain. The only thing in this world that's not liable to change sides in the night. Your sister coughs. Your brother mumbles in his sleep. You smell cabbage and smoke in the thatched air. someone's foot lands on your shin. You nudge it off. It's not ideal. But you've had worse. Once, when the roof leaked during a storm, your bed turned into a shallow pond. You spent the night soggy and furious, protecting your bread from both the elements and the curious, hungry dog. Historians still argue whether peasants truly kept bread in bed with them, or whether that's a modern exaggeration of storage habits. But let's be honest. When you live in a one-room cottage with no locks and 3 semi-hungry siblings, sleeping with your food isn't weird. It's necessary. Sometimes you don't even sleep lying down. You curl upright near the hearth, bread in lap, back against a timber beam. The fire's long since gone out, but the ashes are still warm. It's quiet. Mostly. Somewhere nearby, someone snores like they're sawing wood in their dreams. You squeeze your loaf and adjust your cloak. There's comfort in its weight. And it's more than just protection. It's a kind of ritual. Like a child clinging to a toy, or a farmer clutching a tool. You've had nights where the only thing between you and hunger was that rock-hard lump of rye dough, and you didn't even eat it. You just had it. That was enough. You remember once, when you were small, your grandmother caught you stealing a second crust. She didn't scold you. She told you a story. There was a man, she said, who always slept with a loaf under each arm. For balance, he claimed. But one night, in a moment of kindness, or maybe guilt, he gave 1 loaf to a hungry neighbor. That night, his cottage burned to the ground. Everyone said it was fate. Your grandmother just called it bad luck. She always did tell terrible stories. You shift again in the straw, the blanket slipped off your shoulder, and you tug it back with a grunt. The bread presses into your ribs. You should be annoyed. Instead, you feel reassured. There's something symbolic about it now. You made it through the day. You earned this crust. And now you'll sleep. Cold, crowded, maybe coughing. But fed. Sort of. You dream sometimes about bread the size of wagon wheels. Loaves so soft they bounce. Rivers of honey and jam. Markets full of fruit-stuffed buns and sweet rolls dusted with sugar. Then you wake up, bite into reality, literally, and break a molar on a crust that could double as a roofing tile. Still, it's yours, and it's better than nothing. Because in this world, bread is everything. It's not just food. It's hope. It's memory. It's bedtime routine. There's also the added benefit of keeping it close to stop your younger brother from eating it in his sleep. Yes, that happened once. You woke up to find him chewing absently on a corner of your loaf like it was a dream snack. You yelled. He cried. Your mother threw a wooden spoon at both of you. The dog licked the crumbs off your face. That loaf never recovered. Now, you sleep defensively. The loaf shifts slightly under your tunic, pressing into the hollow between your hip and stomach. It's awkward. It's pokey. And yet it feels right. Like armor. Like a slow, stale heartbeat keeping time with your own. Outside, the wind picks up. You hear it rattle the shutters and stir the trees. Somewhere down the road, a cart creaks past. You wonder who would be traveling this late. A baker, maybe? Someone running from a debt? Or someone lucky enough to have more than 1 loaf? You close your eyes and pull the blanket up to your chin. The air smells of damp straw, wood smoke, and sleep. The fire's long dead. The moon peeks through the thatch. Your toes are cold. Your loaf is safe. And that, you think drowsily, is enough. You wake up to the unmistakable sound of something wet being stirred in a wooden bowl. It's the breakfast pottage, thick, beige, and vaguely lumpy. You sit up slowly, brush straw from your hair, and pat your chest. Your loaf's still there, a little flatter than last night, but intact. A small, quiet victory. You shuffle to the fire, where your mother is ladling the morning gruel with the grim determination of someone who's long accepted that flavor is for festivals. The pottage is made of yesterday's barley scrapings, maybe a few shreds of turnip and water that's seen better days. The smell? Earthy, slightly fermented. You try not to think too hard about it. You reach for a chunk of your bread to dip in the bowl. This, you've learned, is the entire point of pottage. It's not a meal on its own. It's a softening agent. A warm sludge designed to make your brick-like loaf marginally less dangerous to your dental health. You dunk. You wait. You bite. The crust resists, then gives way to a gummy interior that tastes like hay, sweat, and vague sadness. Still, it's hot. Sort of. You chew slowly while your brother shovels his in like a man possessed. A glob slides down his chin. He grins, and for some reason, that makes it worse. No one in your cottage has a spoon, by the way. You share one. Wooden, stained, slightly splintered. If it's clean, it's a good day. If not, you dip your bread and hope for the best. Historians agree that pottage was the cornerstone of peasant meals. Cheap, filling, endlessly adaptable. What's in it depends entirely on what's available, which is almost always not much. You've had pottage made with peas, with weeds, with snails. Once with something your uncle swore was eel, but looked suspiciously like a sock. Still, it keeps you alive. Your bread soaks up the broth, turning limp in your hand. You eye it with quiet despair. There's something tragic about watching your hard-won crust collapse into edible mush. But what choice do you have? You can't eat it dry. It'll splinter your gums. And chewing it plain is an exercise in futility. You'd be gumming it until lunch. You glance around the table, or what passes for a table. A plank over barrels, set near the hearth. Everyone is quiet, chewing in unison, eyes down. Breakfast is not a social event. It's an endurance test. No one talks. They just dip, chew, swallow, repeat. You manage to crack a joke. Something about the pottage fighting back. Your sister snorts. Your brother nearly chokes. Your mother doesn't laugh, but her shoulders shake just a bit. You take that as a win. Sometimes you wonder if you'll ever taste anything else. You've heard stories from travelers of roast meats, of cheese pies, of fish stews rich with herbs. You've even heard tales of butter. Real butter. Soft, golden, decadent. You try not to think about it too much. It just makes the pottage taste worse. There's also dipping etiquette. Unspoken, but rigid. Don't double dip. Don't let crumbs float. Don't dunk your bread so deep it sinks. The bowl is sacred. If someone violates the rules, there's usually a slap, or a spoon to the forehead. You've seen both. You finish the last of your bread blob, and sigh. It's gone. Just like that. A loaf that took hours of grinding, kneading, baking, cooling, and guarding, reduced to a soggy lump in your stomach. You don't know whether to feel satisfied or robbed. You lick your fingers, scrape the edge of the bowl, and watch your mother wrap the last bit of pottage for later. It'll be dinner too, probably. With luck, someone will trade a few onions, or maybe you'll find a beet in the field behind the cottage. That's the dream. a beat. You rise, stretch, and collect your tools for the day. But your thoughts linger on the bread, on how fast it goes, how hard it is to get, and how deeply it anchors every moment of your life. One time, during Lent, the priest read from the pulpit that man does not live by bread alone. You remember looking down at your dinner and thinking, could have fooled me. Bread's not just something you eat, it's something you plan around. Save for, dream about. You've never met anyone poor who said no to a second loaf. Never once heard of someone turning down crusts. Even the birds in the village square fight over crumbs like they're gold. There's a kind of dignity in bread, even the coarse, cracked peasant stuff. It means you've worked. It means you've eaten. It means, if only for the moment, you've won. Still, it would be nice to taste something different. You once heard of a noble feast where bread was shaped into birds, flowers, even castles. You try to imagine that. A castle made of bread. You chuckle. Then you picture your own loaf, a crumbling wedge of barley and bean, slightly burned on one end, shaped like a castle. Still would have slept with it. Always will. Afternoon settles in like a heavy wool cloak, scratchy, warm in all the wrong places, and impossible to ignore. You're bent over a wooden vat, stirring what might generously be called beer. In truth, it's more like watery barley tea that decided to ferment out of boredom. Still, it's what you have. Small ale. Weak, sour, cloudy, and safer to drink than the well water, which has developed a recent reputation for giving people explosive stomach drama. You take a swig from a clay cup. It's tepid, flat, slightly yeasty. You nod approvingly. That's exactly how it's supposed to taste. Your daily bread, you see, is not complete without something to wash it down. And in medieval peasant life, that means ale. Not the heady, hop-rich concoctions of modern pubs, but a thin, low-alcohol brew you sip all day long. Children drink it. Grandparents drink it. You drink it at breakfast, lunch, and before bed. If you're not careful, it might hydrate you. Barely. Historians agree that small ale was a staple, brewed constantly in households across medieval Europe. The weak alcohol content kept it from spoiling too fast, and it killed off the nastier things lurking in water. Sure, it made your breath smell like warm bread dough, but that's a small price for avoiding sudden death by intestinal revolt. And let's be honest, it helps the bread go down. Especially when the bread is, once again, more brick than bun. You gnaw through your midday ration, another hard heel left from the communal oven, and follow each bite with a gulp of ale. Chew, chew, sip, repeat. It works. Kind of. Until the gurgles begin. Your stomach, offended by this repetitive cycle of roughage and barley fizz, lets out a low, seismic groan. You pretend it didn't happen. So does your sister. But your brother? He smirks. Was that the bread talking? You roll your eyes. He has no room to talk. He's the one who once cleared the entire cottage with a single post-dinner event. Everyone remembers. It's become legend. The night of the blanket incident. There's a reason medieval peasants weren't exactly subtle about their digestion. You eat what you can, when you can. It's usually boiled, burned, or fermented. And if your body protests, too bad. You sleep under one shared blanket and deal with the consequences. There's no privacy, no ventilation, and absolutely no shame. You've mastered the art of the silent shift, the polite cough to mask suspicious noises, and the strategic flap of the blanket edge. Sometimes you swear your siblings have made a game of it. Whoever clears the room first wins. It's not all bodily chaos, of course. The ale has its gentle perks. It dulls the edges of hunger, warms your chest, and occasionally gives rise to grand declarations. Last week, a neighbor swore he'd figured out how to make beer from turnips. You're still waiting to see the results? You're also not drinking it, no matter what he says. Some days, someone brings mead. Honey wine. Now that's a treat. Thick, golden, shockingly strong. You had it once. Half a cup and you tried to dance with a goose. It did not go well. You're still banned from that barn. But most days it's just you, your bread, and your small ale. It's a ritual now. You dip the crust in the cup. Let it soften. Swallow. It's almost poetic. Until someone burps with enough force to shake the bench. You can't blame your body. The bread is dense, full of roughage, and not always fully baked. Half the time, it's filled with air pockets that trick you into thinking it's lighter than it is. The other half, it sits in your gut like a sandbag. And after a meal of barley, onions, and questionable greens, your insides become an unpredictable wind machine. Historians still argue how much medieval diets contributed to, shall we say, internal disturbances. Some say poor fermentation and strange additives were to blame. Others suggest it was just the sheer volume of carbs. You don't know. You just know your belly rumbles like a church bell after every meal, and everyone politely ignores it. Mostly. You step outside, stretching in the hazy light. The village hums softly. Sheep bleat in the distance. Someone's hammering a broken bucket, and a woman sings while shaking out a blanket. It's oddly peaceful. You wander toward the edge of the fields, ale cup still in hand, watching the clouds crawl across the sky. A breeze kicks up, carrying the faint scent of manure, wild herbs, and baking bread from a nearby cottage. You breathe it in, and against all reason, smile. It's familiar. It's home. You take one more bite of your crust. One more sip. Then burp discreetly behind your sleeve. It's a good day. Afternoon fades, and now you're hunched on a stool, nervously turning a token over in your fingers. A crude disc of baked clay with a faint wheat symbol etched into one side. It's not currency, not exactly. It's a bread token. And right now, it might be the only thing standing between you and going to bed hungry tomorrow. This little token, worn smooth by anxious thumbs, represents a future loaf. Sometimes it's from the manor's kitchen, sometimes the parish. Sometimes it's a favor owed by a neighbor who took your last crust during the flood month and still hasn't repaid you. Either way, it's a promissory crumb. Proof you're not forgotten in a world where being overlooked means going without. You tuck it into a small pouch hidden in your tunic hem, behind a loose stitch only you know how to reach. Because even something this humble can be stolen, or traded, or lost. Historians agree that in some medieval towns, tokens, whether ceramic, wooden, or metal, were issued by bakers, churches, or guilds as credit for bread. Especially in hard times, they became a quiet, unofficial economy. Fringe accounts suggest some peasants even minted their own crude markers to trade among each other. Unofficial bread IOUs. You've accepted them. You've issued them. You've even tried to barter one for a pair of socks once. The socks had holes. The token was refused. You went barefoot. Because while bread tokens sound like a charming custom, they're really a symptom of something else. Scarcity. Everyone's always one bad harvest away from starvation, and the bread you eat today is often only possible because of yesterday's favor, promise, or debt. You glance across the village square. Near the well, you spot a cluster of children chasing each other with a stale crust, like it's a golden baton. They're laughing. But you know that crust is the last of someone's dinner. You remember being that age, holding a round of bread up like a crown, pretending to be a noble, then pretending to be a baker, then just eating it. Dreams go stale fast. The token in your pouch might get you a proper loaf from the Reeves' wife tomorrow. She sometimes bakes spelt bread with fennel seeds if the mood takes her. That's the stuff of legend. You've had a bite once. It tasted like spring and smugness. Or maybe you'll hold on to it. Wait for a leaner day. Trade it when desperation's higher and value rises. Because bread doesn't just feed people. It moves people. It's as good as coin in most situations. Better even, because you can't eat coin. Not easily. You've tried. In the shadows of the church porch, a group of older villagers are huddled, whispering. You recognize the signs. Someone's organizing a bake share again. It's not official. The Lord wouldn't approve. Peasants combining grain to bake in secret, avoiding the oven tax. But everyone does it. Quietly. Carefully. You contributed a handful of beans and 2 eggs once. In return, you got a loaf the size of your head and the temporary illusion of control. Bread sharing isn't just generous, it's political. Quiet resistance in the form of carbohydrates. You wonder if the baker knows. You suspect he does. But he turns a blind eye because he knows what it's like to go home with nothing but flour on his clothes and air in his stomach. And then there's the bread for work arrangement. You've been on both ends. Offered labor for food, offered food for help. You once hauled water for an entire afternoon just to earn a loaf that had been dropped in ash and rebaked. It was gritty. Still better than no loaf. The weirdest trade you ever made. 1 crust for a tune. A traveling piper came through the village and played a song so strange and beautiful it made your cousin cry. You gave him your last heel of bread? He nodded solemnly and played another. Totally worth it. Historians still debate whether peasants truly saw bread as currency in the economic sense, or if that's a modern projection. But in your life, the line between food and money is thinner than the knife you don't own. Bread is both symbol and substance. You know people who keep crusts like relics. A woman down the road has a bundle of dried bread tied with twine, hung above her hearth. Says it protects her home. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But no one's dared steal it. As twilight deepens, you reach into your tunic and touch the token again. Cool, familiar, heavy with quiet hope. Tomorrow, maybe it'll buy you a better loaf, or a worse one, or none at all, if the baker's in a mood. But tonight, it's enough to know that someone owes you bread. And in this world, that's as good as a promise. You're crouched behind the manor stables, trying to look invisible, which is hard when you smell like onions and the stale ale you spilled on your shirt 3 hours ago. But the scent that's wafting your way now isn't you. It's something far more powerful. Rich, buttery, warm. You peek around the corner and there it is. The manor kitchen door swings open and a servant tosses a basket of crusts into a wooden bin. Crusts. Not even stale yet. From white bread. You sprint. By the time you reach the bin, 2 other peasants are already rifling through it, and a dog is circling like a furry tax collector. You manage to snag a heel the size of your palm. It's cold and smells faintly of goose fat. You'd weep with joy if your eyes weren't already watering from the kitchen smoke. White bread. Real, fine white bread. Not for you, of course. It's a nobleman's staple, made from wheat that's been sifted and sieved more thoroughly than a bishop's conscience. It's soft, nearly flavorless, and therefore exotic. You haven't eaten a full slice in months. Years? Historians note that white bread in medieval times was a powerful status symbol. Lighter meant better. Nobles wanted bread as pale as possible, the flour milled by hand, sifted through fine cloth. Dark bread was for peasants. Pale bread was for people who didn't need to chew. And they always have leftovers. Loaves carved into shapes for feasts, decorative trenchers that held roasted boar, fancy little buns arranged into wreaths. And after the feast, dumped. If you're lucky, some of it ends up in the manor scrap pile, which, contrary to what the Lord may believe, is absolutely not going to the pigs. You and half the village make regular pilgrimages to that pile. It's a game of timing. Too early, and the cook might catch you. Too late, and it's picked clean by dogs, beggars, or worse, chickens. Chickens are ruthless. You take your treasure home like it's gold. It's already half eaten by the time you reach your door. You didn't mean to. It just happened. One bite led to another. That flaky texture. That ghost of sweetness. You had to keep checking it was real. Your sister eyes you with quiet judgment. You tear the last bit in half and toss it her way. She catches it mid-air and says nothing, but you both feel a tiny flicker of triumph. It's not often you get to eat what the Lord eats, even if it was tossed in a bin first. The Lords, of course, wouldn't dare eat your kind of bread. Too coarse, too dark, too honest. Their palates are refined, which is a nice way of saying they're picky and weak. You once heard a noble complain that his bread had too much flavor. He wanted something more delicate. You nearly choked on your oatcake. At feasts you've seen bread used like decoration, shaped like birds, towers, even ships. It's sliced by the steward with a knife so fancy it could be used to knight someone. And the servants? They get what's left, if they're lucky. You're below even that. You're scavenging the scraps from the servants' scraps. Still, there are moments. One winter, during the Yuletide feast, the manor cook handed out sugared bread twists to the village children. Yours was cold, but sweet. You didn't even know bread could taste like that. You licked the sugar from your fingers for a week. Historians still debate whether nobles routinely gave scraps to peasants out of charity or convenience, or whether servants snuck them out behind their masters' backs. But you know one thing. When your stomach's empty, you don't care about motives. You care about crumbs. You've even developed a sixth sense. You can smell roasted fat from a quarter mile. You can identify which manor is feasting based on the breeze. If you see 3 servants carrying out slop buckets, you start walking. Slowly, casually, but with purpose. Sometimes, if the cook's in a good mood, or drunk, he'll hand out hot rolls right from the oven. You once burned your hand grabbing one too fast. You didn't notice until the next day. Tonight, you take what's left of your noble crust, wrap it in a square of cloth, and place it carefully in your hidden spot under the bed. Not with the everyday bread. This is special. A souvenir. You'll eat it tomorrow. Maybe. Maybe. Because deep down, you know it won't last. It'll get moldy. Or stolen. Or you'll eat it in your sleep. But for now, it's yours. And for one brief, buttery second, you feel rich. You're at church, which means one thing: holy bread. And not the good kind, the symbolic kind. The kind you can't really chew, barely taste, and definitely can't take seconds of, no matter how long the sermon goes. You kneel, shift your weight, and eye the priest's movements with a mixture of reverence and hunger. The wafer is thin, nearly translucent, pressed with a cross, and passed out like a divine ration. You hold it gingerly, place it on your tongue, and let it dissolve like it's some kind of spiritual communion-flavored snowflake. Bread, it seems, isn't just food here. It's theology. Historians agree that in medieval Europe, bread played a central role in Christian ritual and belief. The Eucharist, the body of Christ, was the most literal case of "you are what you eat." But for peasants like you, that connection was less philosophical and more practical. You wanted bread. You needed bread. And now, you were being handed a slice of salvation so thin you could read through it. Still, you treat it with respect. Because people talk about what happens when you don't. There's the story of a man who dropped his communion wafer and didn't pick it up fast enough. They say a blood-red stain appeared on the church floor and never came out. Another tale has it that a woman hoarded the host, hid it in her bodice, and woke up the next day with a tongue that smelled of ashes. You've heard them all, and you don't risk it. Of course, it's not just church wafers. Bread shows up in all kinds of holy and horrifying ways. You remember the tale of Saint Honorius, patron saint of bakers, who once blessed a loaf that stayed fresh for 40 days. A miracle. Or the opposite, stories of cursed bread that made entire villages ill. Not from mold or mice, but spirits, or so the village gossip insists. One time, a woman claimed her loaf spoke to her, whispered things. Nothing evil, just advice. Plant early, it supposedly said. Avoid Cousin Marjorie. Honestly, both are good advice. You once held a miracle crust, a heel of bread that supposedly bore the face of the Virgin Mary. It looked more like a sleepy donkey, but no one said so out loud. They kept it in a glass box. People lit candles. You stared at it for 5 minutes, trying to feel something. Then you got bored and went outside to chase a chicken. Even ordinary loaves carry superstitions. Never bake on Good Friday. Always cross the dough before rising. Never cut the first slice inward. Bad luck. You've done all of these things wrong and survived, but you don't like to push it. There's also a quiet kind of magic in the everyday. Your neighbor, old Magda, swears by bread healing. Rub a crust on your bruise, whisper a charm, and bury the bread beneath the threshold. The bruise, she claims, fades faster. The bread, presumably, takes the pain into the earth. You tried it once after a particularly clumsy fall from the hay cart. No magic, just ants. But you understand the instinct. Bread is constant. It's always there. It molds. It crumbles. It burns. But it returns. Every day, someone's kneading dough somewhere. Every day it rises. It becomes something more. And in a world where so little is reliable, weather, lords, livestock, siblings, bread is dependable. It may be tough. It may be tasteless. But it is always, always worth saving. You remember once, as a child, asking your father why the church bread was so thin. He said, "Because the body of Christ is easy to carry, but hard to live without." You didn't understand it then. You do now. You finish the wafer. The priest mumbles something Latin and vaguely threatening. You kneel. You rise. You file out. Outside, the village smells like wet wood, dung, and roasted parsnips. A woman is selling small loaves shaped like fish. For Saint's Day, you consider buying one, but they're expensive, and your pouch is light. You sigh. Still, you feel a little lighter yourself. The holy bread might not have filled your stomach, but it stirred something else. You walk home slowly, hands tucked in your sleeves, thinking about all the strange shapes bread takes. Food, gift, offering, warning, joke, prayer. Your loaf at home is none of those. It's just food. But maybe, just maybe, there's a little magic in that too. You're standing in front of the village baker's stall, pretending not to look nervous. You're not here to buy, of course. That would require money. No, you're here to trade. Maybe gossip, maybe witness a public shaming. Because when it comes to bread, the stakes are higher than they look. See, baking isn't just a chore. It's a profession. Regulated, observed, punished. And your local baker, he walks a fine line between respected artisan and terrified tax target. Today, he's sweating bullets. Not from the oven heat, but because the bread inspector is in town. Yes, that's a real thing. Bread was such a vital part of medieval life that entire laws governed its creation. Weights, sizes, pricing. There was even a device called the bread assize, a kind of official chart that adjusted the cost of bread based on current flour prices. If the baker skimped on size or quality, fines. Or worse. Historians confirm the assize of bread and ale as one of the longest-running pieces of economic regulation in medieval England. And enforcement was strict. You mess up a loaf? You don't just lose business. You could be publicly humiliated, or flogged, or have your bread nailed to your door as proof of your failure. You once saw that happen. A loaf, misshapen, burned, hung like a warning sign. This man tried to cheat the hungry. It stayed there for 3 days, slowly molding, swarmed with flies. The baker denied it was his. Everyone pretended to believe him, but no one bought his bread that week. So today, your village baker is sweating. The inspector has a little scale, a stern look, and absolutely no sense of humor. He pokes, sniffs, prods, measures thickness, breaks a crust in half with grim efficiency. You stand nearby, holding a misshapen loaf of your own. Not for inspection. Just yours. From the communal oven last week. Still good, mostly. You pretend to study a cartwheel while eavesdropping. A young boy whispers that the baker once added chalk to make his bread look whiter. Someone else claims he used ground bone. Probably not true. Probably. There's a reason the guilds exist. Bakers banding together to standardize recipes, protect trade secrets, and avoid getting hanged for crumb fraud. And yet, even within the guilds, there's rivalry. Techniques are closely guarded. Recipes whispered, never written. Your uncle tried to become a baker once. Lasted 2 weeks. Burned himself, confused salt with lye, and fled town after the dog refused to eat his rolls. Not a proud chapter in family history. Still, bakers have power. More than you. More than the tanner or the pig boy. Because everyone needs bread. And when they get it right, golden crust, soft interior, steam rising like hope, it's magic. You remember the last time your baker succeeded? The whole village lined up. Even the reeve took 2. You approach the stall, not to buy, just to offer help. "Can I carry that sack for you?" you ask. Innocently. He squints at you, nods. It's a gamble, a labor-for-loaf exchange. He's not obligated. But today, maybe he feels generous, or distracted by the inspector. You haul the flour sack into the rear room. It smells incredible. Dough, yeast, ash. You linger a little too long, taking in the sight of half-formed loaves lined up like soldiers waiting for heat. Each marked with an identifying notch, a crooked V, a circle, a triple line. Branding, in a way. Because if something goes wrong, the mark tells everyone whose loaf it was. A good baker has a reputation, A bad one has a mark that inspires jokes. You drop the sack, turn, and there it is. Sitting on the edge of the prep table, a small roll, fresh, glazed, not meant for you, but maybe it is now. You glance back. The baker is still arguing over crumb structure with the inspector. You don't steal it. Not quite. You raise an eyebrow. He sees you. Shrugs. A nod. Permission. You pocket the roll. Walk away. Bite in. It's warm. Slightly sweet, with a hint of caraway. You nearly drop to your knees. You chew slowly, reverently. Not just because it tastes good, but because it's legal, fair, earned, blessed by the guild and the grim man with the poking stick. Bread, you realize, is never just bread. It's a product, a symbol, a judgment. And today, it is a gift. The sun hasn't risen properly yet, but you're already awake. Not from ambition, just the cold. It sneaks in through the thatch, wraps around your feet, and settles in your bones. You sit up, clutch your blanket, and glance at the corner where your bread should be. It's still there. Barely. A sliver of yesterday's heel. You sigh. Today is a bad day. You can feel it in the air. Dry, brittle, and far too quiet. There are no distant shouts from the fields, no clatter of hooves in the lane. Just the wind and your stomach, already preparing to be disappointed. The harvest failed. Again. You've been through this before. A season of rain that drowned the barley. A frost that came too soon. A mold that crept through the stored grain like a slow, invisible poison. And now, you're left with what they call famine bread. Not really bread. More like a cruel suggestion of it. You gather ingredients like a desperate wizard assembling a failed potion. Dried peas, bark flour, maybe a pinch of old rye. You grind it together with shaking hands, adding water slowly, as if the dough might notice and protest. It doesn't rise. It barely sticks together. But it bakes. Sort of. Historians confirm that during years of poor harvests, peasants often turned to substitute ingredients. Anything to bulk out the loaf. Bean meal, acorn flour, tree bark. You've even heard of straw mixed with chaff, kneaded with pig fat. Not tasty, not healthy, but chewable, if you're desperate enough. You bake your famine bread on a flat stone near the fire. It smells like damp leaves and bitterness. It's dense, rubbery, and gives off an alarming crackle when you cut it. You take a bite. It tastes like dirt and effort. Your younger brother spits his piece into a rag when your mother isn't looking. You envy him. You're too old to waste food, too tired to complain. You chew slowly, trying to trick your brain into believing it's nourishing. It isn't. Someone once told you famine bread was humbling. That was a noble. Nobles have never chewed bark. Nobles don't understand the quiet shame of seeing your neighbors scavenge nettles and dandelions just to make their loaves look full. You do. And then there's grey bread. A bad sign. It means the baker's stretching flour past reason. Too many peas, too much moisture, not enough grain. It cracks before you can eat it. It crumbles in your hands. But still, people line up for it. Because it's something. One winter, the famine got so bad, the villagers made stone soup. Not metaphorically. They literally boiled stones with herbs, pretending it had flavor. One man swore the rocks gave it undertones. You believed him. because it was easier than admitting there was nothing left. There are stories, ones you pretend not to believe, that in some towns people ground up old bones to mix with flour, that in the worst of times leather shoes and book bindings were boiled and eaten, that when even bark ran out, people dug for roots they couldn't name and hoped they weren't poisonous. Historians still debate how widespread these practices were, whether they're legends or hard truths, but in your village, the line between survival and rumor is blurry. And every time someone eats something new, you wait to see if they're still standing tomorrow. You break off another piece of your bark loaf and pass it to your sister. She doesn't thank you. She just nods. Gratitude is tiring when everyone's hungry. The worst part? The hunger never screams. Not after the first day. It whispers. It aches quietly in your chest, behind your eyes, in the hollow of your back. You forget what full feels like. You dream of warm, soft loaves and wake up biting your sleeve. You catch yourself sniffing the cloth around your bread, just to remember what good smelled like. You keep the scraps, always, even the ones with mold. You scrape the green off. You eat the rest. You don't talk about it. Outside, the wind stirs the ash heap where someone once baked bread too early in the season. It blew apart in the oven. It wasn't the flour's fault. The flour was tired too. You look around the cottage. Your family's quiet. Too quiet. No one talks much during a famine. Words cost energy. Hope feels like a luxury item. Still, you keep going. You grind, you mix, you bake. Because famine bread may be thin, may be bitter, may be grey. But it's better than nothing. It means you're still trying. Still fighting. Still here. And tonight, even if it tastes like boiled bark and boot heel, you'll tuck your loaf under your arm once again, hold it close, and remind yourself that bread, any bread, is a victory, even if you have to chew it for hours. The famine passes, not suddenly, but slowly, like a bad mood lifting after weeks of rain. And with its fading, something strange begins to stir in the village. Celebration. Not the loud, drunken kind with banners and fireworks. No, this is the peasant version, awkward dancing, off-key songs, questionable stew, and of course, bread games. You can smell it before you see it. Smoke, herbs, and toasted flour fill the air as someone carts in a giant basket of loaves shaped like... What is that? A goat? A fish? A surprisingly unconvincing bishop? Yes, it's festival time. The bread feast. Or, as your uncle insists on calling it, crumbmas. Today, bread isn't just food. It's the star. There's wheat for the rich, rye for the rest, and enough barley to sink a modest rowboat. Someone's baked a loaf the size of a baby. It gets its own stool. Children chase each other around the square, holding braided loaves overhead like sacred relics. A few of them try to joust with baguette-like sticks. It ends in crumbs and tears. A small price for glory. You're handed a slice of festival bread, slightly sweet, spiced with something that might be cinnamon or might be ground beetle. You don't care. It's soft. It smells like memory. Historians recognize these seasonal bread festivals as vital social glue, an excuse to gather, to perform rituals, to say, we made it. We survived the winter. We outlasted the mold, the rot, the rats. We chewed our bark loaves and didn't die. Let's dance. At the center of the square, someone has fashioned a bread effigy. A large, lumpy man, arms outstretched, face lovingly shaped from dough and raisins. He is dubbed Sir Crust-a-Lot by popular vote. A cheer goes up when his bread arm falls off. He's doing better than last year's, which collapsed completely and had to be eaten on the spot. You participate in the traditional tossing of the loaf, a circular game of keep-away played with a particularly sturdy roll. The goal? Don't let it touch the ground. The reality? Someone's going to get a black eye. You do, but you also catch the final toss, earning a round of applause and half a carrot. Someone's strumming a lute. Someone else is trying to dance with 2 left feet and a meat pie. You sit on a fence and nibble at your festival slice, feeling warmth spread through your fingers despite the chill. Nearby, old Magda is selling fortune bread. Tiny buns with omens baked inside. You buy one with your last coin. It's dry. Inside is a blackened bean and a scrap of cloth. You ask what it means. She squints at it. You'll either become a tailor or fall into a well. Comforting. There's a wedding today too, scheduled to coincide with the festival. Bread plays its part here as well. The bride carries a loaf on her head. The groom must slice it without letting it fall. He manages it, barely. The village cheers like he just slayed a dragon. Then everyone eats the loaf, scattering crumbs in the couple's footsteps as a blessing. And to feed the chickens? Efficiency. Historians still debate whether these bread-centered customs were pre-Christian, Christianized, or just good excuses for carbs. You don't care. They're yours. They make the year feel round again. Complete. Marked by more than just hunger. Later, someone sets fire to the bread effigy. A symbolic gesture. You all chant something nonsensical, half prayer, half drinking song, and watch the dough-blackened figure slump into ash. The smell is oddly pleasant. You spend the evening trading bites of different loaves, wheat from the steward's wife, honey rye from the brewer's cousin, and something mysterious from the visiting peddler that might be made of turnips and bad decisions. You love it anyway. And then, just before dusk, the children gather around the elder, who holds up the ceremonial bread crown, a ring of crusts and ribbons tied together, passed from head to head like a wreath of resilience. It lands briefly on yours. Your siblings cheer, you grin, you curtsy, you eat your share. Tonight, the bread will still sleep under your arm. That won't change. But for the first time in weeks, you'll sleep full. Not just in the belly, but in the spirit. You'll dream not of famine bread or spoiled crusts, but of dancing loaves and raisin eyes and crumb crowns. And even if tomorrow is dull and damp and full of chores, tonight you remember what bread can be. Celebration, ceremony, absurdity, and maybe, just maybe, joy. The celebration's a warm memory now, tucked away like the last good crust of a once grand loaf. The dancing's stopped. The effigy is ash, and the bread crown hangs crookedly over someone's hearth. You're back to routine, back to the simple rhythm of knead, bake, chew, repeat. And with that return comes an old, unwelcome visitor. Suspicion. You bite into your daily slice and pause. There's something off, not in the way it tastes, though that's rarely thrilling, but in how your tongue tingles. Your fingers feel heavy. Your thoughts drift. You blink hard. The walls of the cottage feel too bright. Your little sister is talking, but her words sound like bees. Are the shadows pulsing? Ah, ergot. Historians know this one well. Claviceps purpurea, a nasty fungus that infects rye and mimics grain until it's baked into bread and eaten by the unsuspecting. In small doses, it causes dizziness. In larger ones, hallucinations, convulsions, blackened limbs. They called it St. Anthony's fire. You call it Tuesday. You've seen what it does. You remember the man who leapt into the river to baptize his loaf. The girl who spent 3 days screaming about wolves in the rafters. One time, a whole family danced through the village in their nightclothes, claiming they were in a royal wedding procession. The bread was to blame. And it's not just the madness. There's the numbness, the cramps, the awful tingling in your arms. The kind that starts slow, like a whisper, and builds into something loud and cruel. You once heard of someone who lost 3 fingers before anyone thought to blame the bread. Today you're lucky. You feel strange, yes, but not screaming in the manger strange. You put the slice aside and sip water. It tastes like old onions. You don't care. You just want to feel normal again. Historians still debate how common ergot poisoning really was, whether it caused outbreaks of dancing mania or even fed into witchcraft hysteria. After all, bread-induced hallucinations would explain a lot of possessed behavior. But to you it's not mysterious. It's mold. It's damp grain. It's poor storage and bad luck. You peek at the rest of the loaf. A few black specks. You poke one. It crumbles. You swear softly and toss the whole thing into the fire. A sin, maybe, but a forgivable one. Better ashes than agony. You don't bake again that day. You just sit quietly, chewing plain boiled oats, watching the fire lick at the tainted crust. You think about how fragile the line is, between food and poison, comfort and chaos. One moldy grain can undo a week's work. Later, a neighbor knocks with a gift, half a loaf from her bake. She smiles, says it's fresh. You smile back, accept it with both hands, and inspect it like a suspicious coin. It looks fine, smells fine. You take a cautious bite. Your hands don't tingle. Your eyes stay focused. Relief washes over you like warm broth. You give your neighbor a sprig of mint in return, one of your few luxuries. She looks pleased. Trades like this matter. Trust is currency. So is safety. By nightfall, the loaf is mostly gone. You saved a slice. Wrapped it, as always. Tucked it under your blanket, close to your chest. But even as you lie down, you feel yourself second-guessing. Was it safe? Was it really? You remember a superstition Magda once told you. If the bread sings, it's clean. If it weeps, it's wicked. She meant the sound it makes when cooling. But now, in the dark, you think you hear a faint hiss from the crust. Just the fire, probably. Still, you whisper a blessing over the loaf before you sleep. Something old and nonsense-sounding. By crumb and crust, by flour and flame, keep this bread from bringing shame. You tap the loaf twice. Habit. Your mother says if you dream of wheat fields, it means the bread is pure. If you dream of storms, toss the loaf by dawn. You fall asleep hoping for golden stalks, not thunderclouds. Because bread, even now, even always holds power. Power to warm, power to harm, power to blur the lines between life and something stranger. You're walking home in the dark, your boots caked in mud, your hands sore from an entire afternoon of threshing. You're tired, hungry, and slightly damp, but not empty-handed. Tucked under your arm is a curious loaf, hard as a helmet, baked today in secret. A wartime loaf. There's a hush over the village these days. News has trickled in. Skirmishes, sieges, lords demanding men and grain in equal measure. When armies march, it's the peasants who feel the rumble. And when grain is taxed for soldiers, it's your dinner that disappears. Tonight's loaf is made from what you could scrape together. Dried nettles, boiled acorns, a handful of barley husks, and a scoop of mystery flour from the bottom of someone's sack. It smells like desperation and moss. Still, it's food. Historians tell us that during wars and sieges, bread quality plummeted. Loaves were stretched with sawdust, crushed insects, even powdered roots. Some were made without salt, some without flour at all. What mattered was bulk, something to fill the belly, keep a soldier standing or a starving villager from collapsing. You once heard of a city under siege that baked bread from ground-up roof tiles. The rumor said the bakers went mad. You believed it. Your loaf tonight was baked in a hidden pit oven, coals buried in earth, covered with a flat stone. It works, sort of. The bottom burns, the top stays pale. The middle? Well, you'll find out. You bite into it cautiously. It's chewy. In a bad way, like wet bark. There's a crunch you don't trust, but it goes down. You remember the first time you saw war bread, when soldiers passed through and left a few crusts behind. Your brother took one, soaked it in ale, and said it tasted like cow and cardboard. You thought it tasted like courage. Maybe that's because it was someone else's. Now you've baked your own. There's no celebration around it, no feast, no prayer. You chew in silence, listening to the village around you grow quiet, doors shutting with soft thuds, fires dying out one by one. There are other signs of strain. The miller's charging more than he should. The baker's reduced his loaves by half. Some families have started keeping crusts in old shoes, claiming it keeps rats away. Mostly it just makes everything taste like leather. You've heard whispers of bread riots in distant towns, of bakeries stormed when prices spiked. It's hard to imagine here, where no one even raises their voice unless it's at the pigs. But hunger turns gentle people sharp. It always has. Historians still argue whether peasants truly rioted over bread, or if those stories were exaggerated by nervous nobles. But you don't need history books. You've seen the way eyes follow a full loaf. You've heard the edge in your neighbor's voice when he jokes about how your bread smells better than his. It's not a joke. One evening you find yourself bartering with a soldier passing through. He's rough, tired, missing 2 fingers. You offer him half a loaf. He gives you a bit of smoked meat in return. You don't ask what kind of meat. You don't want to know. For a moment you sit beside him, chewing in companionable silence. You ask if war tastes different at the front. He chuckles. Everything tastes like iron and regret. You nod. That sounds about right. He tells you soldiers sometimes bake fire cakes. Flour and water mashed into paste and cooked on stones. No yeast, no salt, no mercy. They eat them like punishment. Worse than eating your boots, he says. Then adds, their boots taste better if you boil them long enough. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because you need to. That night, you bring your half-loaf home like it's treasure. You offer your family slices. They eat it without complaint. No one asks what's in it. You're grateful. Later, lying in the straw, you tuck what's left of your wartime loaf under your tunic. It's cold, crumbly, and smells faintly of ash. But it's yours. And in a world where men fight over sacks of flour, where bakers bake with sawdust, and where every meal might be the last real one for a while. It matters. You press your hand to the loaf, close your eyes, and whisper a promise. Stay with me through the night. Just till morning. The bread doesn't answer, but it doesn't leave either. It's deep night now. The kind of quiet that only comes after the fire's gone out, after the last yawn, after even the chickens have stopped muttering in their sleep. The only sound is your own breath and the soft rise and fall of your siblings nearby, bundled in the straw like lumpy sacks of potatoes. And then there's your loaf. It lies against your side beneath your tunic. Smaller now, reduced by meals and nibbles and the occasional greedy sibling who thinks you don't notice. You always notice, but you let it go. Because what else is there to do? This last hunk of bread has been with you for days now. You've guarded it, rationed it, slept with it like it was a relic from a better life. It's stale at this point, tough around the edges, soft in odd places, but you still can't bring yourself to eat the final bite. Not yet. Because once it's gone, there's no promise of the next. You lie still, hand resting gently over the loaf's lump beneath the wool. It feels warm, just barely. From your body, from the long day, from the memory of the fire. You think about all the roles bread has played in your life. It's been your breakfast, your dinner, your pillow, your barter. It's been bait and trap and blessing and burden. You've toasted it over flames and dunked it in swill. You've cursed it when it went moldy and kissed it when you thought no one was looking. Bread is more than food here. It's the measure of your days. You count your week by loaves. You weigh your luck by crumbs. Historians argue endlessly over the symbolic power of bread, its spiritual, social, and economic significance. But you don't need parchment to tell you what you already know in your bones. Bread is life, and in this dark, quiet moment, as the world shrinks down to your own breath and the heat of a body-warmed crust, you feel it deeply. This bread, this rough, stubborn little wedge, is your victory. Not a grand one, not a song-worthy one, but a quiet, enduring one. You've made it through another day. Just before sleep claims you, you think of all the absurd things bread has seen you through. The rats in the bread you danced around, the bread you fought over, the bread that nearly poisoned you, and the bread that tasted like peace. And now, this last crust. Not much to look at, not much to bite, but enough. You close your eyes, breathing slow, listening to the hush. The loaf, pressed close to your chest, rises and falls gently with your breath. Still here, still warm, still yours. And now, as you drift toward sleep, let it all soften. Let the straw bed beneath you grow still and silent. Let the distant rustles and night creaks fade like whispers. There's nothing left to guard now. No more flour to grind, no dough to knead, no crusts to chase through muddy streets. The bread has done its work. It has fed you, held you, grounded you. It has been your ritual, your habit, your humble companion in a world where little stays the same. But here in this quiet, all of it melts away. The bite of winter air, the ache in your joints, the rumble of hunger, all gone, if only for now. The fire's gone cold, but your body is warm. The room is dark, but your mind is soft and slow. You lie curled around the simple comfort of your final slice, no longer needing to defend it, no longer counting the days by its size. Let the loaf rest. Let you rest. Tomorrow may come with more grinding, more burning, more watching loaves rise and fall like tiny sunrises in the hearth. Or maybe it will come with nothing at all. And that's all right. For now, you are still. You are safe. You are full enough. The world outside can wait. Let sleep settle in like flour over a well-worn table. Let it blanket you in quiet, like a final dusting of peace. No more chewing, no more guarding, just breathing, just drifting. And as your breath slows, and your hands go slack, and the loaf nestled beneath your arm becomes part of the dream, let go. You made it. Sleep now.